Are you curious about the big opportunity? The big opportunity for a real estate agent with this NAR, National Association of Realtors settlement proposal that came out March of 2024. I think there's a big opportunity as a seller's agent to double your fee, and I'd like to chat with you about that. If you want to hear about it, you're in the right place. Let's talk. Hi, I'm Mike Cerrone with Mastermind Agent, and I'm really excited to chat with you here for a quick second to try to share with you a quick idea on how I think that you may be able to capitalize on what's going on right now with the proposed NAR settlement and the real estate industry for residential real estate brokers. And so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the seller agent fee and how I believe you can double it. I'd like to share with you a little presentation I put together. So let's go ahead and check that out. And it should be on your screen right now. All right, cool. I'm going to move this up real fast and turn on our slideshow. And hopefully you're seeing that. Good, here we go. So again, this all comes about because of the National Association of Realtors. They put together a settlement proposal for the big lawsuits that they're in. They put this proposal out on a Friday in March of 2024. And I think that there is, again, a seller agent fee opportunity to double. I'd like to walk through that with you and share that idea. First, I'm going to make a fast disclosure because it's all brand new and I don't want to give any legal advice. So this presentation is only for educational purposes and not legal advice. It's just a thought exercise to stimulate potential solutions. Commission rates used in this presentation are for concept and clarity only because rates are negotiable per broker and per situation. So seek advice from your broker and attorney before attempting any of these ideas. Again, these are just my opinions, not legal advice, just some thoughts. All right, let's jump in. So here is the problem and challenge that I foresee has come down the pike. And again, I'm just going to pull some text that came out of NAR Settlement. They put together a settlement fact sheet that you can find out there. Here's a link to it if you just want to see the link. Also, you just go out into Google and type in NAR Settlement fact sheet. You'll get to this document. It's a 4-page document, kind of just shares the outline of their proposed solution. I think the final solution is like 108 pages, but this gives the big brush strokes. And so there I took out from that a couple of things that were listed to try. I think these are the two most important items that affect us as a real estate industry. Number one, NAR, and this is just text right out of it, says, hey, NAR has agreed to put in place a new rule prohibiting, stopping, not allowing offers of compensation on the MLS. That is huge. And the change will go into effect by mid-July of 2024. All right, so that's coming up pretty quick. The big key here is they're prohibiting or not allowing, they're going to take out of the MLS the offer of compensation from a listing broker to a broker working with a buyer. And so that's where the big challenge is. And this definitely is affecting our industry and will affect our industry. People have theorized on that. In fact, even myself, before this final thing came out, I didn't think it was going to affect us that much. Now I think it is, but I think it's going to be solvable. All things are. All right, so the other thing that they had in there, the other piece of text that's important you should know and will affect our discussion here is the settlement provides that MLS participants working with buyers must enter into a written representation agreement with those buyers. And I don't have it written here, but it's prior to showing the first house. So prior to showing the first house, you have to get into a written representation agreement with that buyer. And that change is going to go into effect by mid-July 2024. Again, they haven't come to a final resolution yet, but this is what they think it's going to be. And we'll assume that for our discussion today. This is not as hard as you think it is. I know a lot of agents don't get agreements written with buyers before they show them, which I think is an error. I've been doing it for 30 years. It's really not that new. Back in 1993, I got my real estate license. That year in Colorado, they just happened to put into effect buyer agency. They put in buyer agency, transaction broker, and dual agency. So we've been experimenting with those things for 30 years. And in fact, just a side note, in Colorado, we don't have dual agency anymore because they experimented with it. And 10 years ago, there were so many lawsuits, they decided to get rid of it. But we still have buyer agency, transaction broker, and seller agency. And then also just working with someone as a customer. But that's our state. Your state's going to be different. Make sure you know the rules and laws in your state. All right. You need to put an agreement together, though, because this is going to be a national rule. So let's move forward. This is, by the way, a proposed settlement, and the terms may change before we get to the end. But based on this, we'll go ahead and go with a concept and an idea. So that's kind of the problem. Here's what I think 3 quick results that are going to come out of it, and it's going to line up for our solution. Number one, after the change, most listing agents will not negotiate a buyer agent fee into the listing agreement. Instead, what listing agents are going to do, in my opinion, is they're only going to negotiate the listing side of the commission as their fee that they're going to receive for representing that seller. And then they're going to let the buyer side fly and let the buyer agent deal with that. Okay, that's going to be the big change because the listing agent can no longer promote it through the MLS. And so their concept's going to be, well, then I'm not even going to worry about the listing appointment because now I don't have to justify that large of a fee. I can just justify my smaller fee, the fee coming to me, and I'll just let the buyer agent again fend for themselves. I think that's what's going to happen, makes listing agents more competitive. I just see that playing out that way. We'll see what happens. All right, but I'm going to assume for our argument that's what happens. Therefore, most listing agents are going to reduce their listing commission to just that listing agent side. And now result number 2 that pops out of that is that after the change, buyer agents must have a buyer sign a buyer agency agreement before they can show any homes, right? And many buyers, though, are not going to sign. Okay, they don't want to be obligated to pay the buyer agent. They either are fearful of the amount of money, they don't want to dig into their own pocket for doing it. They can't see how that's going to work. They're just not going to sign. And if the buyer agent has a poor presentation, not showing value and not showing a solution, which, by the way, I hope to show you, as we go along here. I think I showed you on another video, by the way, the solution, so look on that on our channel. But that's what I think is going to pop out. Again, let me just share that again. Many buyers are not going to sign or be obligated to pay the buyer agent. They don't want to be obligated. So here, I believe, is result number 3 of that situation. So instead of signing a buyer agency, many buyers are going to go direct to the listing agent. That's the bottom line there. A lot more buyers now are going to go direct to the listing agent. And that creates the opportunity, okay? Because the listing agent now is going to treat that buyer as something, depending on their state rules, but it's probably going to be either a customer or they're going to practice dual agency or transaction brokerage, whatever you and your brokerage decide and whatever the rules are in your state. But something like that is going to happen where you treat them as though they're not being represented, and they're okay with that because they don't want to pay any fee to be represented. Or in your state, if you have dual agency, that may be possible, or transaction broker. You get the idea. All right, let's keep moving. The listing agent risk, though, is this, and this is the big challenge. The risk is, hey, now the listing agent's thinking, whoa, I just took the listing for lot less than I normally would, and now I'm supposed to work both sides. I'm supposed to help both the seller and the buyer, but I'm only getting paid for one side, the listing fee, but I'm earning half the commission that I would have earned. This is not fun. I don't even know if my business is going to work right or I'm going to make a profit. So now I'm doing twice the work for the same amount of pay. And that is a legitimate concern and problem. But I think that it's coming up because you haven't gamed it all out in your head yet. And that's why I'm hoping to give this quick presentation to help you. And so here's the solution I believe that is going to happen. I think it's going to come down to a variable commission structure. It's going to be a variable commission structure in the listing agreement with the seller. So when the agent goes out to meet the seller and they put together a listing agreement, they're not going to just have one commission. They're going to have multiple commissions based on different factors. And here's how I believe it's going to break out. It might be different ways, but this is my idea of the way I see it. One, by the way, it's going to break out by procuring cause. Go all the way back to when you got your license and you were learning about procuring cause. That's the person that brings the buyer that results in a closing, right? And so if a seller is the procuring cause, so like you list the property, the seller bumps into a cousin who says, oh, I've always wanted to buy your house, or a friend at work that says, well, I visited you 3 years ago at a party and I thought it was a great place. Love to raise my kids there, or whatever the situation. The seller brings the buyer. Now the seller's the procuring cause and the commission's going to be X. So your statement in your listing agreement says, hey, the seller's the procuring cause, the commission's X. Got it. Okay. Now, next, it's going to have a second option, and that is if the listing agent, if the agent representing the seller is the procuring cause, in other words, brings the buyer in and is the reason that they end up purchasing, then the commission is going to be Y. And in our case, we'll just say 2X. All right, it's going to be more. I don't know if it's going to be double, but it's going to be more, okay, because you're doing both the listing side and the buying side. And so in my example, that would double the listing agent's compensation. So instead of getting just the listing side, you're now getting what would be historically the side that would be the working with the buyer. All right. And that's why I believe you're going to double your compensation. This is going to happen more and more frequently. And then if a buyer agent, this is the third option you write in. If a buyer agent other than the listing agent, so somebody coming in from your company or another company, but they're not you, becomes the procuring cause, they bring the buyer in, then the commission is X. Okay, it's that listing fee portion, and it's going to be the buyer the buyer agent's commission will be negotiated and paid out either by the buyer, the seller, or some combination of the two. So we're letting our seller know that this is what's possibly going to happen on the other side, and that may reduce the seller's cost versus the old way if the buyer pays their own agent or the other agent doesn't get compensated from the seller for some reason and it doesn't ask you to pay them, right? These are all options that could happen. But if for some reason the buyer pays their own agent, the seller would effectively pay less. However, you as the listing broker, you still need to get paid your fee for doing what you've done in this transaction. And that's why I believe it needs to be listed out and explained as one of the options. And I think the easiest way to break this out is procuring cause, the old-fashioned procuring cause that the old timers created decades ago. Pretty smart concept. Who brought the buyer, who ultimately closed? Who was the reason that that buyer came in and closed? Okay, I think that's the way it's going to break out. We'll see what other solutions come up, but I like this one because it handles all situations. And let me give you kind of an example. So if the seller is the procuring cause, the commission 10%. If the listing agent is the procuring cause, the commission is 20%. And if an agent, another agent is the procuring cause, the listing agent is going to receive 10%, and the buyer agent commission may be paid again by the seller or the buyer, or both in some split through negotiation. It's all going to be negotiated in the contract at the time that you make the offer. Okay. Now this gives everyone an incentive to find a buyer. So I think this is pretty cool in the way it breaks out. Now I want to go back to number 2 for a second, where you're double ending. In the old days, we called it double ending. So you're the listing broker, you're bringing the buyer and the seller. It happens. I did it 25% of the time in my big year where I closed 113 homes. So absolutely, you can double in transactions. It's just you're going to start looking for it and looking for the possibility of that happening. And you're going to just start putting more together, which is pretty cool on the listing side. When you end up taking a listing, you now have the option, you have a stronger opportunity or probability of bringing in the buyer and getting a double-sided commission here. So let's walk through it real fast. So double listing agent payday. The listing agent has an incentive now to find and work with the buyer, and because they're going to get double the commission of just their half or the portion they would have received before. Now, to make this work, you're going to have to think this out before you get into the situation. So you're going to have to predetermine the double-ended transaction working relationship and agency disclosure. So how are you working with the seller? If a buyer pops in, how are you working with the buyer? How are you going to disclose that to both parties to make sure that you're complying with agency law in your state? Okay. Then you also need a listing presentation that has a variable commission option listed out and explained thoroughly so that anybody can look at it and go, oh, I understand, that totally makes sense what's happening. There's 3 options. I understand it's going to be procuring cause, blah, blah, blah. Okay. And then we've got to have a listing agreement. This is your contract with the seller that shares that variable commission option. It's already pre-filled in to meet before you meet with the seller. Okay. And you're going to map this all out with your broker, make sure that they're happy with it. If you're the broker, you're going to map it out with your attorney, make sure you're complying with all your state laws. All right. And then we've got market the home. You're going to then market the home with an eye towards buyer lead generation. Okay. So a lot of times the market's been really hot. If you haven't been in a slow market, you're trying to go out there and find and bring in a buyer. All right. And so there's a lot of different ways to do that. I gave one example here that you might not have done before, but now you might consider, which is a mega open house. Why? Because fewer buyers are going to be represented floating around out there. And as time goes on, it's possible that fewer and fewer buyers will take buyer representation. We don't know. It might go the other way, but if it is, you've got to start thinking, how can I bring in the buyer myself and double in this transaction and get a double payday? Okay, how can I turn these lemons into some lemonade? All right, let's keep going. All right, in a property In the property marketing, the marketing for the property, the house, make sure that the buyer can contact you, right? You may have been making your contact information small or difficult to get a hold of. Now you got to really make that information big and make sure you're answering your phone all the time and have a system where the next one that you're able to show their own listing, like if you've been a listings exclusive agent, you're going to have to now think about how can I make sure this property gets shown? Am I going to do it or someone else? If it's someone else, I'm going to refer it out and hopefully get a referral fee. So I want to get that arrangement though pre-set up before I run into the challenge so that I can move quickly and do volume. All right, so those are a couple of the thoughts that I have for you. And sometimes I think it's helpful to see it visually. So I'm going to show this to you real quick. The old way, the buyer agent procures the buyer. So we had a seller side commission and a buyer side commission. We had a seller's agent and a buyer's agent involved in the transaction. And then the old days, what happened was the seller side commission went to the seller's agent and the buyer side commission went to the buyer's agent. Now we got this new way where we have the listing agent procuring the buyer because the buyer's coming directly to them because they didn't want to pay a buyer agent commission or whatever their concept was and just wasn't explained well to them. So we've got a seller side commission and a buyer side commission, and the seller's agent, the listing agent, brought both parties together, the buyer and the seller. And so here's the good news. The seller agent gets the seller side commission and the seller agent will also receive the buyer side commission. That's the concept that you want. Now you just have to make sure it's all planned out and written out so that everybody understands what's going on and it's in writing. And again, you're going to want to go with your broker and attorney to make that happen. All right, so that is the big explanation. I hope that was very helpful to you and that this is a concept that may make things a little easier for you to move along and a cool opportunity for you to see what's happening out there and how you could take advantage of the situation and capitalize on it to turn it into something good. Okay. If this has been helpful, go ahead and give our video a thumbs up. Really appreciate that. It's good for our channel. Also, if you like this information, want to see more, go ahead and subscribe to the channel and we'll get you more good information out. If you've heard anything that I said, like, I don't know, Mike, or yeah, I agree with that, go ahead and write it down in the comment section below so I can get some feedback and see how we can make sure that we're all kind of growing together. I think that would be beneficial. Well, I appreciate you and thank you so much for coming in and meeting with me today. Keep moving forward. Bye for now.